how can we move and express ourselves in a way that we feel we're not being judged? And what practices lead us to a place of safety so we can be our most authentic selves? Hi, I'm Anna Maria here at Move and Bloom, a safe space where together we can grow possibilities. And I'm super excited to have with me here today, Lisa Wilson. Lisa is a photographer here in Southern Indiana, specializing in playful photography. To learn all about playful photography and how play can turn on our learning brain, make sure to stay tuned for the whole conversation. We'll be exploring some of the practices that have led Lisa to develop what she now calls playful photography. So without further ado, welcome, Lisa. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. This is such a beautiful space to be in. I'm honored.
I'm excited to share it with you and excited to hear your story. Tell us what launched you on this path to developing playful photography?
I love that question because it brings in the richness of all of it. Far too often, I don't think we think about what has developed someone into who they are. We just see who they are. So thank you for asking that. So the story that I have evolved from is one that's been driven by curiosity and anxiety. An unusual dance, a tango for sure. But it's manifested differently throughout my life. But it has always been, those two forces have been driving factors in who I am. And it was, early on, it's the typical, great grades and doing as expected and pursuing everything that I possibly could. But only that which I knew that I would excel at. So, I was not a sports person, but, I would do math and drama and all that fun stuff. It always came along with the heavy seasoning of, people pleasing and perfectionism and fear of judgment and everything that pulled me back into the square of behaving how things should be expected. And I might have continued on that path forever. And it's not a bad path. It might have led to great financial success and job after job after job, great things. But I did have one of those flip things that people often have in life. Those, life isn't what you think it is. We went through a period of, graduated from college and got married. And I'm trying to think of like the order of this. So I had this, this honors degree from psychology and a minor in human sexuality, doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And then we graduate and get married and it's great. And then we have a kid and my husband graduates from pharmacy school and we move to a different town so he can start his job and we buy the new house and everything is stacked up, as we have been working and as we should. And then I think, kind of as it tends to do, life exhaled and it blew over this stack of cards that we had been building up. And I had, I'm open about my life and how it has progressed. During that time, my dad took his life. That tumbled everything. My husband lost his job because the business was relocating. We ended up having a second child. And everything that I thought that I knew about how life should be was suddenly flipped. And I was left in this place with all of this curiosity and no answers. And just day after day, progressing forward. And throughout that time, I started discovering that not only did the answers not fit, but the questions that I had been asking weren't even the questions I wanted to or needed to ask anymore. So this led me on this like couple decades long exploration I have a whole bunch of different paths. Going through yoga teacher training and doing some graduate work in well-being and studying photography and various different forms of art and expression and mindfulness and meditation teacher training and all of these things. And I don't have that one point where my story changed and I'm like, oh, this is it. And I've got it. It was this gradual acceptance that the process itself was valuable. And that's where it has, if there's an end point to this present moment, that was that changing point, the ongoing changing point of knowing that all of these things that I've experienced and explored and all of this grasping I was trying to do for these end points and finding this success, it's about the process.
Yes. And, I really want to stop and highlight the importance of shifting from focusing on the what to focusing on the how. How are we doing what we're doing? Because this is central to my work and part of what attracted me to your work, of course, because if we're process oriented, the what doesn't matter so much. Of course, it matters to the individual,
right.
but it's the how that we get really curious about and where the juice is, as another practitioner I know says, that's where the juice is. So I'm really excited to hear how shifting from the what to the how sort of began to birth this idea of playful photography, because you already have a lot of elements that you mentioned that might take you into playful photography.
That's a great way to say it. A lot of the elements. That is, I love to play with the word remembering and, re-membering, as if we are taking members of ourselves, parts of ourselves, and bringing them back in. So I love that you mentioned that. Oh, beautiful. And that how it really is the essence, isn't it? Isn't it the present essence of whatever it is that we're doing? I'll tell you this is a little side thing that comes back to the playful photography because it always winds in. I noticed how much I was focused in thinking instead of moving. And I know that this resonates greatly with you and your work. And I adore that. There was many years ago, I went for a walk one day and I was like, oh, this is going to be fantastic. I'll just go for a walk. It felt great. And then I went for a walk the next day and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And as I tend to do, perfectionists challenge me. I'm like, all right, I'm going to keep going with this. I'm going to see how many days I can get. And that embodied practice changed into something that I have been doing every single day for over 6 years now that I titled it the Walk 365-ish project.
I love that.
Yes, it's great. And the name, it may change to reflect the depth of what this has brought to me, but I still hold on to that ish because as part of the story on that day 50, I didn't go for a walk. At the time, it didn't mean much, but what it has evolved into is embracing, again, that process, the practice of the walking, and not necessarily the disciplined, oh my gosh, I have to do it exactly this wayness. As I went through this practice, and even unbeknownst to me, what was happening was an embodiment of these different things that I had been thinking about. And that led to this. It led to the playful photography, the being curious about something and then moving into it, moving with it. So playful photography at its essence is really people coming together in mindful awareness. And it sounds kind of weird for photography. You're like, well, now you're taking pictures, But I like to think of it like Starbucks doesn't really sell coffee. They sell an atmosphere. They sell, that. And that's kind of what playful photography is. There is this quote, this poem by Mary Oliver that I always come back to. And it's her instructions for living a life. And that's pay attention, be astonished, and tell about it. Yeah. And that's what we're doing through playful photography. I always like to stress too, because there tends to be something within me that resists it. When I think about play, because I'm like, oh, life is too serious right now. We don't have space for, laughing. I also want to hold on to this fullness of being. So play isn't just about, joy and laughter and giggling. Yeah. You know this with your work. It's this non-judgmental, curious engagement with whatever is going on. And it's not the forced smiles, it's an allowance. So the playful photography, as it's evolved, has taken different forms. On the outside, in some cases, it may look different. It may be like, you've seen some of the pictures where we're, playing with the balls or going to a play set or something. But it's also a traditional form of photography. It's engagement sessions and, bridal sessions and headshots and such. Right. But the difference is, like we had talked about, the how instead of the what. Difference is how we are showing up and the intentions that we bring when we come together. And there's this sense of curiosity. Yeah. And this idea, as you had mentioned in the beginning, of creating a safe space where people can come together, and I will, direct as needed and, help people find themselves, find this moment. Right. And then we just allow ourselves to expand into whatever mood we happen to be in that day and what the environment allows.
And if I may, I want to draw on several things you've said so far.
Yes.
So it's very tempting to create a sense of safety for ourselves by boxing ourselves in. You did that perfectly before, right? The box, it is safe, it is secure, it is a known path. It's the should, could, I will, Yes. And so we try and create that sense of safety for ourselves, but we don't really feel safe. And something comes along. It's so much easier to lose our equilibrium when we're in a very rigid stance, right? So if I stiffen myself and stand with both feet together, you could come and push me over very easily, yes. Right? And I don't really look like I'm thriving, right? If I'm holding everything rigid, I don't appear appear like someone who's engaged in life, enjoying herself, thriving.
Yes.
But if I soften and get curious and settle into my body and allow for movement, flexibility around all the joints, you could come give me a little push and I'm going to go with it. I have any number of responses that I could engage in, and it would probably be fun. So I feel like I can even picture like Olin Mills. Did they subject you to Olin Mills when you were little? I like,
oh, right. We both do the same.
Right. So it's not only the embodied experience, it's also the felt experience. Like, am I putting on this projected image, or am I going to play and get curious and have fun? Yeah. So I am loving this idea of coming together with intention and mindful awareness. How does this play out in your sessions?
Oh, I love the way that you're moving in the words that you're using, because it's like this, that is this is true conversation and presence. And this is invaluable for me, hopefully for us and for those who are watching, to know that this is possible. I love that thisness, I think as adults, honestly, we've forgotten how to play. It's like you said, we walk around like this all of the time. And I think that there's this sense of as we've mentioned, the shouldness of life. I can only speak to my experience, but that shouldness of being productive, and productivity means laboring in a way that society deems acceptable. And then we are allowed to rest, but only if it's in service of that continued labor. And I think that coming into a photography session is a very vulnerable place for many people to be, because, anytime a camera is stuck up in front of you, you're reminded that you're being seen. And I think for many people, myself, I'll just speak for myself. When that camera is on and I feel like I'm being seen, it automatically brings in all of that shouldness of being judged, of being a people pleaser. And that Olin Mills pose, it's the one we go to because we're like, okay, I got to be seen this way. So in the sessions themselves, that's what, if I don't know the person that I'm working with, I always want to meet first, Zoom or in person or something, just to have this and be like, hey, I'm real. You're real. Yep. My dog's over here. Yeah. My kids are in here, that sort of thing. And then in the session themselves, it's talking first so that it's not camera up. It's moving first, because there is that sense of disembodiment that we all have. And so if, I talk and we're having a great intellectual conversation, that's wonderful. Right. But if I am then asking somebody to move their body or to just voluntarily go play, with that tendency that we have to be disembodied and thinking about it all, it's going to get into thought poses. And even if we look like we're trying to play, it's going to look like we're trying. And I don't want that for the photos, and I don't want that for the experience. I want for both of us to be at ease and curious and playful. So that's how it starts. And then it just typically evolves in unique ways depending on the personality and the mindset of the person in that moment. Somebody may be super bubbly, but I can tell that they're having a bad day that day. So our photo session is going to be softer. We may have some things we talked about before of, hey, I want to wear this thing, or I want to be up in that tree, or whatever the case may be. But if that day, the environment or the mood is not conducive to that, then we allow for that and we move with that. And that creates an experience that is so important, that mindful awareness of whatever we're doing today, however we're showing up, it's okay. And the photos that result, when I go to do the editing, I'm not editing, skin or anything like that. I'm going and I'm remembering what that moment felt like. And I am making sure that the photos match what that felt like. And then what results is people seeing themselves in the true beauty of being fully themselves and having something to remember that by. Yeah. So
I love that. That's fantastic. And I see how it can draw on so many of your talents. Because I want to get to the writing here in a minute.
Oh, yeah.
Before we go there, I want to touch on this remembering, because in neuromovement, during a lesson, and this is during a voice-led lesson, some are touch-led, but during a voice-led lesson, you'll often hear me say, don't orphan your parts, right? Oh. Right? Because we are a whole and we are parts. And sometimes our awareness is focused more on one or the other, like foreground, background, foreground, background, but always with a sense of coming home to ourselves. Like, how do we put the part back in the context of the whole, right? And it really sounds like what you're doing when you bring all these pieces, moments of a person together as you edit. And I've realized that you also do it in your writing, right? You're bringing together a seamless whole. So I'm wondering how your experience as a writer has played into this whole photography thing too.
Oh my goodness, you're so good. You can tell that you are good at what you do, pulling these things together and recognizing. I can feel myself as you're talking, you know, not orphaning your parts. I can feel my fingers dropping back into my hand, into my elbow, and up to my shoulder and into my core. And I'm like, oh, there we go.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
And that interestingly enough ties right into that writing. Even though I type a lot, I'm already envisioning myself with a pen and how that works. It's a great question about how that writing and the photography weave together and all of these random things, seemingly random things that I've pursued throughout the years. I have always journaled. That was something that I did that I think saved my soul when I was young. I just, you know, the trials and tribulations that we go through as youth. Writing was my way of connecting to myself and feeling like I was connecting to someone else, because often the stories were written for an invisible audience. And I have books and books of journals. These days, I continue it. And a lot of my walks, my daily walks, I'll have my phone and I'm voice recording as I'm going along. I'm thinking of all these thoughts and and all of that. And I think what that helps me to do is to have this self-awareness that would otherwise be absent. It is this hearing the stuff that races on in all of our minds all of the time. Being able, being able to listen to it. I know, even now I'm like, oh my gosh, sounds and you know. But it's all this chaos that comes out in jumbled words. And there's the benefit of having the words themselves that I can reflect on and, you know, rearrange like puzzle pieces and such. But as we've mentioned, it's also that process of being able to listen and express and to pay attention and be astonished and tell about it, even if it's just telling myself about it. Over the years, that evolved into, you know, blogging and online writing and expressing my ideas in ways that I discovered that I was not alone. Even if my experiences were unique. You know, I was a mother with 2 kids in Midwest America and speaking to somebody across the world. There was something in that shared experience that clicked for both of us and resonated. You know, whether it's shared suffering or shared joy, you know, there's a lot of different things that we can pick up on in our stories. And as I continued to pick up my camera, and I found myself not just being behind the camera and witnessing, but being more connected with whoever or whatever was in front of me, being mindful with the whole, the orphaned parts that I had left out because I was hiding behind that camera or hiding behind my words. The more that I started to share the words and share in the experiences, the movement, the actuality of being with someone in photography, the more that I came to appreciate how we all need that, to be seen, to be heard, to not feel judged, and to be in presence with people, practicing with the same mess, we're all going to stumble over it. We all feel judged at times, and we're all going to judge others at times. It's our human nature.
Yeah.
But when we can realize that we're in practice with one another through that, whether it's through writing or photography or dance or Excel spreadsheets or whatever, the more that we find ourselves being astonished with it, and sharing our astonishment, our pains, our joys, the more beautiful life gets day to day.
Yeah. I love that. And I'm going to tell you why I love that. Because one, you're describing love, right? You're describing a practice of love. This is a gift you give yourself and a gift you give others. Because what is love but to witness another without judgment and to hold space for them in that moment without putting anything on it. That's why I want to come back to your word curiosity, because I think connection is at the heart of any great practice. And I've heard you talking about connection, even though you only recently started using that word in this interview.
Yes.
And in neuromovement, we're connecting bone to bone, right? If I've got someone on the table and I touch them, I'm not looking to touch tissue to tissue, although that gives me information. Everyone's fully clothed, don't worry. I'm looking to get feedback from their bones into my bones so that we can orient sort of against each other. And to do that without judgment, right? Because it's so easy to watch someone and think, oh, they move this way, this must be going on. I have to constantly be saying to myself, I wonder, right? So I'm wondering how you bring this sense of wonder, this curiosity into your role behind the camera. What's going on for you during the actual shooting?
I'm moving in your wonder right now.
Yeah, I enjoy that.
I wonder. That's probably what's going on for me nonstop behind the camera is I wonder. I have found, so there's another poem quote. I love poems and quotes, but there's another one that I absolutely love that ties into this in my experience behind the camera. What has led me there, and it's that the famous Rumi poem, and it begins out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing. There is a field. I'll meet you there, and that is. When I am behind the camera, if I remove myself from that field, if I remove myself from that wonder, that curiosity, it happens all the time in every photo session, and I can feel it.
Yeah.
I find myself tightening up, physically tightening up, mentally tightening up, and I can hear myself either over-directing the clients because I want that sense of attachment and control.
Yeah.
Or I find myself moving away. And what happens in that instance is the client is left to figure out what they are supposed to do. And I'm just back here and I'm like, okay, just, whatever, just go play. And that's when I recognize in the moment that I am disconnected from what's happening. It's a constant practice of coming back then and saying, I wonder what's happening within me right now. That's disconnecting me from that. I wonder how I can reconnect with that person by either helping direct more or direct less. I wonder, all of the camera settings and all the things, if I change this and move this and all of these thoughts that are going on. But it's this sense, again, of that mindful awareness that I have, because I've often said, I don't want someone seeing the camera. I want them seeing me.
Yeah.
You can tell a photo when somebody's looking at the camera. It's way different than when someone is looking at me, or even better yet, looking at themselves, looking at the moment. So when I'm, taking these photos, it is my constant practice and joy, because this is what I want to do. I guess your idea of falling in love.
Yeah.
I am falling in love again and again with that moment. And when I can see within myself and the environment, a studio or a forest or whatever, and the person, and fall in love with all of that over and over, then it becomes easy. The camera is just this tool where I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Click, 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 click. And I get to capture what's already beautiful. But like I said, it's a practice. Every time I am dropping in and coming back, and dropping in and coming back, and over directing and under directing, and so be it.
I have to ask you then, because maybe it's the same for photographers, maybe it's not, but just on a wild hunch here, would you say that your, what do we call them? Photographies, your subjects.
Yes. Clients.
Your play buddies.
Yes.
Your play dates. When you think back to the moments where they're really connecting to themselves in the moment.
Yes.
Would you say that it's when you yourself are most connected?
Heck yes. I think that is the beauty of this, is that when I don't know if it's energy, I don't know if it's, some thoughts that are like going between people or whatever it is, science, woo-woo, whatever we want to bring in. I think that when we give ourselves permission to be ourselves, we unintentionally or intentionally give someone else permission to do the same. So when I am most connected, and I'm just like, going around, I notice that they start playing too, with whatever it is. If someone's with them, they will play better with them. If it's a fire hydrant, they'll play better with a fire hydrant. I mean, countless scenarios. And it works in reverse too, which is why I love this work. If I'm off, and suddenly they go and they're like, oh, a slide. And they want to go down the slide. Or there's a plant that they go to explore. Or suddenly they just breathe. That.
Yeah.
And I feel myself moving into the same space. Yeah. And we dance in and out of it together. And that's
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And we're talking at it from a very heart-centered place. And I'm remembering that, oh my gosh, I better mention the brain.
Oh, yes. The science part, yes.
The brain. Because play has this way too of waking up our brain, turning on our learning brain so that we move more smoothly, more easily. Unless we're not smooth on purpose, but we move more smoothly, more easily. We express ourselves more easily. We connect more easily. So could you, and maybe this isn't something that you've thought about, but have you noticed that when people are actually in play mode, that something about their movement, their speech changes?
Heck yes. I love that you brought that up. It's fantastic. I recently read a book called Unwinding Anxiety. I think it's Dr. Judson. I need to find out his name. And it spoke a lot. I am fascinated by the scientific background of things, because that's how I was raised. Logic. It speaks a lot to the different parts of the brain, of our nervous system. And one thing that he talks about is trigger, behavior, and result. So tying this into photography, you're aware of all of this, and, a lot of your listeners might be as well too. Yeah. But, we have the prefrontal cortex. I'm very visual. So I'm like this thing, but we have our thinking, the reasoning, the logic.
Yeah.
And then we've got, I like to call it the cave woman brain. We've got our cave woman brain that's down in there. And she's constantly trying to keep us safe, find us food, protect from the big monstrous things, Yeah. And when we are out in play, when we are in a safe space where that cave woman brain can go, oh, good, okay, I'm good, Yeah. This thinking part of our brain is allowed to rest for a moment. It's allowed to think and process and do what it wants to do. We can't think ourselves into play because the cave woman brain is always going to go, oh, you're not safe. It is not safe to do. It's not safe to look silly. Oh my goodness, you are going to be judged and ostracized from the tribe, and then you are going to starve out in the jungles and be eaten. So don't look silly. Don't allow yourself to be vulnerable. If you're feeling like crying right now, don't do it because you're going to show a weakness, and a weakness means that they're going to leave you behind. And then again, you get eaten.
It all comes back to that. You're going to get eaten.
It does. You're going to get eaten. Let's face it. So it's all of this time we're trying to think our way and say, no, I'm safe. It's just a camera, or I'm being instructed to do this. And we can't do that. So this environment, yes, when we go into play, I can notice the difference between someone who's thinking about playing and someone who's curious and playing and being. And nothing wrong with either way, just different ways of being. And it's that exploration between them, just being aware, mindfully aware of what's going on. Am I thinking? Am I moving? Am I feeling like crap? Am I feeling fantastic? What's happening?
And do I like it? And do I not like it?
Yes, exactly. And what do I do about that? Do I?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's amazing, right? It's like I can do, feel, evaluate without judging, right?
Right.
And then choose a different direction or the same direction. And so it's, I love the dance you're doing because it is literally that dance of allowing the feeling and the thinking self to merge into a more powerful whole.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That holistic, again, the healing, the coming back in, and then falling apart again too, because that's life.
Yes.
It's remembering and forgetting. And I've noticed a lot of people that I have talked to, and I'm sure in your work as well too, where there's this sense of, oh my goodness, that was great. I feel wonderful. I feel, super. And I learned how to play or move or feel better.
Whatever.
And then there's the judgment afterwards because that falls away. And it's like that too is part of life.
You called it. People are like, why doesn't this last forever? Because you are a living, dynamic system.
Yes.
You don't get to stop eating because you're full and then think that you have been nourished for life. Our soul needs constant nourishment. Our moving body needs constant nourishment of all these things. So I love it. I love it that you brought that up. And I'm so curious. This popped into my mind while you were talking, you must get some great blooper photos too. It would be so awesome to see look, that's your thinking self. That's your overthinking. I mean, yes. I personally, at this point, I have to get a session and I want to see all the outtakes, my thinking self, my play self, right?
That is a fascinating thing that you bring up because I love including all of those. My favorite ones are the ones, the blooper, somebody, or something.
Yes.
And I will include all of those. And I never share photos without someone's permission. Right. But those are my favorite when they give me permission. Those are my favorite to share because, again, it invites someone else to be like, oh, they were like that too. They make that face with the double chin and they look fun. I want to do that.
You bring up such an important point. we cannot get to the play. We cannot get to the exuberant, wonderful, or if we're talking movement, to that smooth, ideal movement without landing on all those other places. We have to land on as many of those other places as we can to give our brain the rich information it needs to form a complete picture of what's going on. So then our brain itself, not our thinking self, but the inner workings of the brain can go, here's where I want to be right now. But I remember this other thing for when I need it later, right?
Yes.
We don't want to throw away parts of ourselves.
Oh my goodness. I love keeping all of those neuronal connections as possibilities that the brain can go, oh my goodness, I've got 100 options right here instead of one. And those 100 options are all safe. They are safe and they are okay. Yes.
Oh, I love that. Wow. So how do people find you? What's the best way for people to find you?
Best way for people to find me is through my website, Being Breath. And sometimes people have thought that I have said bean breath, which is kind of funny, but not my site, but that's okay. So it's BEINGBREATH.com. And I am also on Facebook. That's probably where I'm most active right now. And I'll include, links, and I'll, comment with all of that, but it's Lisa Renee Wilson almost everywhere, or Being Breath. And that's probably, I know that always. And that's probably the best way to connect. Yeah.
Wonderful. Are there any other projects going on for you right now that you wanted to share?
Life is happening. And as I mentioned, it's the perfect time because I just noticed there's a delivery person coming out right now. So and there's my dog. So anyway, I feel life is happening. It's life. Exactly. So there we go.
So you've got life going on, huge long-term project.
And yes, indeed. Life stuff. So in thinking about what's coming up, I think there was something that I wanted to acknowledge. It has nothing to do with this. And it's, my son's high school graduation and caring for my second child. And I do that because I think that we often think, almost all of us think of work as that thing that we're being paid for. Right. And yet work is the richness of life. And so, yes, I do have, I'm got more sessions being scheduled, and I'm updating website with more writing, and, that type of work. And work is this, work is the dog and the kids. So yes, thank you for asking.
Oh, I love it. And thank you for sharing such a whole picture. That's beautiful and resonates beautifully with the rest of our conversation. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we sign off?
I thank anyone who has been listening thus far and who has been with us. And I hope that I feel like this has been a wonderful conversation. I'm so honored for this. And I think that I'd be doing kind of a disservice not to acknowledge that there is so much going on in the world right now, and so much going on with every person that I talk to, chaos and suffering and turmoil and such. And so amidst all of this joy and this laughter and this that we need equally, I think that it's a reminder of what that matters most right now is whoever is listening to this. Yeah. Is your experience right here, right now, as you're listening and getting ready to drift off into your outer world. And so that remembering of, hand over belly and hand over heart, and breathing into this and going out into your world, your laundry, your meeting, your next drive, the next conversation, Facebook scrolling, no judgments, whatever. Mm-hmm. With your breath as your guide. And just remember to play, to pay attention, and to be astonished, and tell us about it.
I love that. Thank you. This has been a wondrous, joyous, and very real conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today, Lisa. Thank you for sharing your many talents with my listeners and the world around you. I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.